Hello and welcome to this month's Music Community Sessions. I'm Ben Givers with Dolby Laboratories in Los Angeles. And for this session, we have a very special conversation with Atlanta-based mix engineer, Mr. Finis White, aka KY Engineering. KY has mixed the likes of Drake, 2 Chainz, Nicki Minaj, Missy Elliott, Meek Mill, Rick Ross, just a few names there. Amongst many others. And he's recently done the Dolby Atmos mixes for 2 Chainz, Kali, and Atlanta rapper and producer Suave on his recent album, I'll Meet the Sun, which he mixed at Soul Asylum Studios in Atlanta. It's an awesome album. It's released by Def Jam, and it's kind of a deep autobiographical take on growing up in Atlanta and features some truly amazing rhymes in a lot of different styles. Features from James Blake, G Herbo, and it's held together by these kind of cinematic skits that give it this classic hip hop spirit while still being super incredibly fresh. KY was the original stereo mixer on the album, and his Atmos mix really allows the vocals to come through and shine. The 808s stay punchy, and he makes sure that it's all translating to listeners who are enjoying it on headphones. And he's going to share how he does it, plus a little bit about his background and coming up in Atlanta, what makes the Atlanta music scene so special. And I actually had the privilege of going down to Atlanta to hang with KY and Suave at Soul Asylum, and it was an amazing and inspirational experience. Hopefully you feel inspired by KY's story as well. Super excited to share that with you. We'll also be doing live Q&A, so add your questions to for KY in the questions box in GoTo, or you can send them to musicwebinars@dolby.com. A couple of quick bits from around the Dolby Atmos music world before we jump into the interview. Huge shout out to everyone we saw at CES in Las Vegas in January. Hope you were able to attend a one-night-only special event featuring Imagine Dragons performing live in Dolby Atmos at Dolby Live. It was a special benefit for the Tyler Robinson Foundation, but there's a recap video of the show on our YouTube page. And you've probably heard the buzz about Dolby Live. It's a 5,200 seat theater and the first entertainment venue of its kind to have a fully integrated Dolby Atmos system to support live performances. It's inside the Park MGM in Las Vegas, and recent live shows live in Dolby Atmos from Usher and Aerosmith have been a big hit. Usher has another run coming up, but I was lucky enough to be at the Imagine Dragons show, and wow, it's just an incredible sonic and visual experience. It was truly amazing. So huge shout out to the Dolby Live team. Check out the video on our YouTube channel. An amazing night overall. Some interesting new artist content from around the Dolby world, literally from around the world, include 2 new pieces of content showcasing cutting-edge techno DJs harnessing the power of Dolby Atmos. First, DJ producer and studio owner Axel Bowman discusses how he's using Dolby Atmos to sculpt his sound and bring a more psychedelic quality to the music while thinking spatially about his compositions. Check that out at our YouTube page. And also, legendary DJ Dubfire presented his latest album, Evolve, at 2 Dolby Atmos screenings at ADE last year. And in this new video that was just released, he talks with mix engineer Eric Horstman about using Atmos to give the listener a more well-rounded immersive listening experience. And he's thinking spatially about creation now as well. Again, you can check out both of those videos at Dolby's YouTube channel. And also from the Latin music world, and fresh off his Latin Grammy win last year, Marcus Witt sits down with Argentinian mix engineer Martin Cano at Studio DMI in Las Vegas. Shout out to Luca and the Studio DMI crew. But Marcus and Martin sit down to explore his mixes on the new Vivere album from Marcus Witt. This video takes you inside the studio as Martin describes his creative process, and Marcus and his team are literally moved emotionally hearing their music in Dolby Atmos for the first time. It's a really beautiful piece. Check it out at our YouTube channel as well. Okay, quick reminder, there are some, again, new Spanish language music creation tutorials that are sort of advanced level from Dolby Institute, featuring mix engineer Luis Del Toro, along with the studio and setup and mix videos. The self-guided learning curriculum and the downloadable exercise content is also at Dolby Institute. You can grab a 90-day trial of the Dolby Atmos production suite with the renderer, binaural settings plugin, and the music panner, and also grab the Dolby Atmos album assembler trial, which allows you to put those mastering finishing touches on your albums of ADMs. On the studio side of things, new and existing studios that may be seeking guidance with design, implementation for a retrofit or tuning, be sure to use the Music Studio's onboarding form. We also have a dedicated studio team, dedicated teams around the world actually to support your needs. You can also email musicstudios@dolby.com. We have a new and updated music creation quick start guide at the pro site. It's a handy PDF with links to all the resources, quick start videos for each DAW, links to the forum and knowledge base, and also room design FAQs. So for calibration and placement, and how to get your studio set up and make sure it's going to translate properly. Check out the content creation quick start guide and also the studio setup and calibration video with Luke Argilla and Brian Pennington is available at professional.dolby.com. Following this session and each month, mentioned this on the last session, we'll be sending out a survey asking for your feedback on these community sessions. What do you want to see more of? What would you prefer to see less of? Who would you like to see featured? What topics are important to you? Please keep an eye out for that survey. Your feedback's very important to us, very valuable. And again, these sessions are meant to bring the music community together. So please give us your input. You can email us anytime also at musicwebinars@dolby.com. All right, in last month's music community session, we talked to Dennis Rock AM Jones, fresh off the work he's doing for artists like Rihanna, which he mixed in Dolby Atmos recently. He shares some of his producing and Atmos ideas as well. Check that out. And for this month, it's on to Mr. Finis White, aka KY Engineering. Let's jump into that now. Good to see you, man. Thank you so much for doing this.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, man. How's your day going so far in beautiful Atlanta?
Good so far. Good so far. Can't complain. You know, it's a beautiful day out here in Atlanta, Georgia.
Nice, man. One of my favorite places. Well, you have worked with some of the absolute legends of the game: Drake, Nicki, 2 Chainz, Lil Wayne, Meek Mill, Missy, and some newer artists like Suave and Kali. But want to talk a little bit about how you got started. You're based in Atlanta now, obviously, but you grew up in Kentucky and you're self-taught in the studio. How'd you get going? How'd you get started?
Really, I say as far as me starting, of course, I'm from Lexington, Kentucky, of course. Finest KY White, KY Engineering, KY, Silver Fox, whatever you want to call me. And I'm, like I said, from Lexington, Kentucky. So I actually got my start in music kind of in church, honestly, as a kid. I want to say that's probably like my beginning. And then eventually, as I kind of got older, I started playing. The first instrument I ever played was in elementary. We had those recorders. It was like a little kind of almost like a clarinet type thing. So I had that at first. And then in middle school, I played the violin. High school, I played in the band. And all my friends were rappers. So I decided, oh, I don't really actually want to rap. I did maybe about 2 or 3 songs, but I decided, as you can hear, my voice is very, very deep. So I never actually wanted to hear myself rap. So I just decided, hey, let me figure out how I can, at least I want to be around the music, so let me figure it out how I can actually do it. And that's how I ended up kind of getting into the studio thing. As far as like actually, I went to the studio with my friends a few times, and then from there, that's kind of when I ended up getting into the engineering side of things.
And you kind of taught yourself, right? As you were getting going in Kentucky, you learned the trade, learned just by being scrappy, and got yourself to Atlanta a couple of times, right?
Yes, sir. Like I said, just starting off from the beginning in Lexington, Kentucky, of course, it really wasn't a big music industry at this time. And this is back in the days kind of when you actually had to have studio equipment. You couldn't just pull out your laptop and different stuff like that. So technologies came a long way, which I think I made a few tweets about that a few weeks ago about technologies. But yeah, so like I said, I just started there, and then eventually I ended up moving to Atlanta, Georgia with the same guys that I was in high school with. They ended up having a record deal down here in Atlanta with a label. And I ended up moving down here with those guys. We were down here maybe 3 years, maybe, at the beginning. Times got a little rough, so I ended up moving back to Kentucky for maybe like a year and a half. Caught me a little job, saved up my money, and moved back down to Atlanta, Georgia. And at that point, I was kind of just sleeping in my truck because I kind of came down with no plan. I just knew that, hey, I'm going to try to make this engineering thing work out. And that's kind of what I did.
And you made it work out, man. And we've got the records behind you to prove it. Jack Harlow's on your wall back there. Talk about like building relationships with artists. Like, what does that mean to you? I know you built a relationship with a guy like Jack early on and helped
Mhm.
him actually move to Atlanta from Kentucky. Right? Like,
Right.
what does it mean to you to like build that relationship, as an engineer, but also like as a friend in the community?
Building relationships as an engineer, and especially in the community of music, I mean, it's very, very, very important. Because as far as an engineer, honestly, I tell people this all the time. Artists are actually what they engineer probably sometimes more than their family when they're coming up. So, you're not only are you their engineer, you're kind of their therapist at the same time too, because music is therapy. So they're kind of in there doing what they do, and you're kind of going through life with them because they got something going on. You're kind of the only person that's kind of there to talk to them at that point. So building relationships is very important. And then when you look out trying to outsource to do different things, like as far as just me knowing different producers and um, people that just play instruments, guitars, keys, whatever it is to try to make all these records come together. You know what I mean? And just playing that middleman between the artists and maybe some of these producers, and maybe even looking for the producers and bringing them to the artists.
I mean, and in Atlanta, what an amazing scene and network of people from, the club scene to the studio scene, the rappers, just the music scene in general, crossing so many different genres. What was the vibe like when you got to Atlanta, and what's it like now? And uh, do you gain inspiration from it?
Oh man, I love Atlanta, man. That's why I kind of chose to come here. Off top, it was just the music scene. Of course, I came here in 2003 was my first time, so this is kind of like the crunk era. Like Bone Crusher had came out with Never Scared, with Ti, Killer Mike. But before that, of course, I'm watching Outkast, TLC, the whole of Face, Escape, and just all the different artists that they had. Chris Cross, I grew up on Chris Cross, love Chris Cross. Um, and I just always had wanted to come to Atlanta, and once I kind of got down here and actually was able to get into the scene, it was super cool. Just kind of being able to soak up all those vibes because the city just has a vibe itself. So when you go into the studio, you kind of taking those experiences into the studio with you. So like I said, I love Atlanta, man, and just to see how much it changes and how many different styles of music that I've been here for. Honestly, like I said, I started with crunk and it went to kind of the lean and snap. They had the black boy, white boy movement, kind of futuristic, trap. So you kind of got like all these different genres of music that literally came from Atlanta.
That's so awesome, and it continues to evolve. And newer artists are paying homage to those sounds in their records now.
Yes.
And you've worked on a lot
Yeah.
of those. I mean, the Suave record, he's got so many different styles on it, and
Right. Yeah, I love Suave, man.
absolutely amazing. So, the work you did on the record, man, like incredible. I mean, you were the stereo mix engineer and the
Mm,
Atmos mix engineer on that album,
correct.
and what a beautiful like autobiographical album. It's not just a collection of songs; it's a true album. Talk
Right.
a little bit about it, mixing it in Atmos, but also being the original stereo mix engineer on it as well, and kind of how those two things came together.
Well, of course, the first time I met him was actually at the Dolby Atmos studio. Shouts out to Soul Asylum. That's where I was at. And so I ended up talking to his A&R, and his A&R was just kind of like, he needs to get into the Atmos thing. He kind of didn't really understand it at the time. And I was also in the process of working on some stuff because I was doing a lot of Two Chainz back catalog at the time. So once I ended up doing that, I ended up calling him through one of my sessions just so I could kind of show him exactly what it was. And, he loved it, man. And so from there, that night, he actually said, "Hey, I want you to do my stereo mixes." So I was like, perfect. And so I ended up listening to the music before I got the stereo mixes, and man, he just blew me away with the music. Like I said, just the different styles, the raps. Like I'm a big fan of lyricism. Like he has a lot of that, just the creativity and he actually made a cohesive album. Because I think a lot of times now when guys are making albums, they're not. They're just kind of a collection of songs nowadays, and streaming kind of goes with that a lot of times. Because when you had a cassette or a CD, vinyl, when you had those things, it wasn't as easy. I mean, of course, with CD, you could skip to the next song, and vinyl as well, you could skip to the next song. But it's just different how you kind of did it. Now, you literally, people now, when a new album comes out, people literally automatically hit shuffle, which is not how you should listen to an album the first time. So that was kind of the cool thing, like I said, that I loved about Suave. It was a perfect album, and it had a lot of layers, which made it perfect for when I went into Dolby Atmos with it.
Do you think about what you're going to do with like vocals, like layers, backgrounds, and ad libs, like before you actually get the stems, like based on the stereo version? Like, Were you thinking, how can I elevate and take this to the next level by listening to the stereo version? Or did you kind of get the stems and say, okay, I'm going to take it from there?
Most of the time, of course, like I said, I'm mixing the stereo first, but now that I've been doing Dolby Atmos for almost 2 years now, it's crazy to think, but I've been doing it now for almost 2 years. So um, normally when I'm mixing songs now, the fact that I know I'm going to have to end up going and doing the Dolby Atmos, I kind of go ahead and I'm thinking of different things, and also too after I actually do the stereo mix, I also when I'm printing the stems, I'm kind of printing them in a different way because sometimes, say if it's certain sounds or whatever, in a stem I might just combine certain stuff sometimes just because it's kind of easier that way if they're similar. But with the Dolby Atmos, I just kind of go ahead and just really, really stem it all the way out as far as I can because the more layers, the better the Dolby Atmos comes across because I got more stuff to kind of play around and put it in all these different speakers that I have.
And so, like on other projects too, when you're asking for the assets, are they usually delivering you stems with a lot of processing on them already, or are you mostly getting them dry and kind of doing what you need to in Atmos from there?
Some of them I'm kind of been getting dry and wet. I would actually prefer them to go ahead and at least be wet because that way, the one thing about Dolby Atmos, of course, you're kind of basing it off of the stereo mix at this point. Maybe eventually, maybe some people will start actually doing a Dolby mix as they're mixing the record. But as of right now, we're kind of going from stereo to Dolby Atmos. So I'd rather them go ahead and at least be wet. That way, when I load the files in, everything's already at least sounding like the mix. And then let me take that mix and bring it into this immersive world.
Nice. And you use a combination of the Pro Tools panner and the Dolby Atmos music panner as well.
Yes.
What do you like about the music panner when it comes to effects and vocals?
The music panel is cool, man. Especially like if you got like I like when I have delay on stuff that's already in the stereo mix, and maybe I printed that delay, and then when you kind of get to moving stuff around in the Dolby, in the panner, it's crazy. Like I just love it because you kind of hear those trail ends of, especially if you have something kind of moving around at the point in time. Like it's just cool because you kind of it's like you hear the sound and then the delay's kind of following it as it's moving. So I kind of like little stuff like that. Of course, I even like with the panner. I like that you can also even if you don't have something moving around, I can actually kind of see exactly where the sound is hitting at. So I like that part of it as well.
When it comes to like working with samples or whatever you're delivered, what have you found best works for like treating samples in Atmos? Like maybe it's a horn blast or a vocal sample from like an old record or something like that. Are you getting that isolated in some cases, or is it part of a mix with several other elements in it?
Oh well, if it's a loop, which a lot in hip hop, a lot of guys use loops nowadays. So sometimes it might be a lot of sounds combined. But with that, I actually have a EQ kind of thing that I can use, and I can kind of maybe at least try to isolate some of those elements if I can. But for the most part, the loops I kind of can't do much with. But I would love if when everything is tracked out, is like I said, I can really touch the horns. I can touch these keys, and they're not all kind of all combined. Which, like I said, that kind of just makes it better when I'm doing everything because I can kind of take everything and put stuff where exactly where I want it. Like I said, I can put it over top of me. I can move it around. I can have it in front of me and back of me, like wherever exactly you want it. So, like I said, I think it's always important to really try to break it down as much as you can. But it's kind of hard with the loops sometimes. So, like I said, I will kind of take the approach of using the EQ and just kind of EQing out the different parts that I want.
Do you have any like go-to plugins for EQ, plug-in filters, or anything like that?
Yeah, I like the Pro QE3 Pro Q3. I like that a lot from Filter Fab. I love them. They got some dope products. It's another one that right now it's slipping the top of my head right now, but it's another one that I use too. It's Isotope, and I use that a lot too.
Nice.
And also too, Serato has a very very good plug-in as well. Because if you kind of have like sometimes stuff is two track as well. So if I'm working with a two track, like they didn't have all the stems when they mixed the record, I can actually take Serato and I can kind of get different elements from Serato as well because you can actually take it and filter it out and get the vocals separate, get the beats separate. So Serato has a real dope plugin as well.
Especially with their stems plug-in now. Like
Right.
they've come a long way. Yeah.
Right.
Shout out to Serato, and of course, shout out to Soul Asylum and Raphael,
Yes, sir.
and Amber over there as well. Awesome
Capo.
studio. Question about like bass, and I'm listening to like the new Two Chains record, and there's like a lot of like distorted but kind of smooth and punchy kind of 808 kick and subs. How do you make sure that that's kind of preserved when you're doing the Atmos mix?
Well, like I said, most of the time with a lot of the bass stuff, well, let me start. When I'm doing the stereo mix, like I said, that's kind of a style that I like to have where the kick and the 808, because I'm from the South, so of course that's how we like it in the South. We love those dirty kicks and those dirty 808s, but still, like I said, it still needs to be smooth at the same time. So I always try to make sure that when I'm doing it, I'm kind of adding a little bit of distortion kind of to it a little bit, but at the same time, like I said, kind of EQing and compressing it, still smooth, and it's not just breaking the speakers. Like it might sound like it's going to break the speakers, but it's not going to break the speakers. So then when I take that over to Dolby Atmos, of course, most of the time with a lot of the bass stuff, you kind of more so keeping it in the front of the room for the most part. So you're kind of using the LFE channel, center, left, and right. And then I might take little bits of it and kind of spread it around just so I'm kind of filling up the room with it. But it's very, very light as far as if it's in the back, it's very light. Like, I mean, I might be 2 dBs, like where it's kind of almost whispering. But most of that's kind of in the front because a lot of times how I kind of look at it when I'm doing Dolby Atmos, I'm looking at a lot of that stuff as a movie theater because that's basically kind of how it is. But I'm putting this music in a movie theater. So when you're thinking about movie theater, a lot of the bass and the sub stuff is all behind the screen and on the floor. So you got to kind of make sure that you keep. That's where the strong part of anything that's kind of sub driven, bass driven. I keep all that in the front. And of course, like you said, just checking your levels and maybe even doing a little bit of gain staging inside of Dolby Atmos just to make sure that it's still knocking, but at the same time, just not busting speakers out and catching phasing issues by me putting it in all these different speakers.
Yep, nice. And then when it comes to using like the binaural settings plugin for headphones, I think of a track like the remix on Cali's record, where like the
Mm-hmm.
background vocals are kind of like moving behind you, kind of from left to right, and the ad libs are coming in on one side. Uh,
Right.
how is the binaural settings plugin kind of working for you for headphone translation?
Man, I love it. Because of course I'm using the most time when I'm listening in binaural settings, I got the small AirPod Pros. I mean the AirPod Pros, the big ones, and then the Max, I got the big ones. So that's kind of how I'm using it for the most part. And of course, I also have a Bose sound bar as well. So that has a Dolby Atmos in it as well. And of course, that's running off binaural. So most of the time when I'm doing that, I'm just trying to make sure that I'm still, like I said, catching the integrity. So if I'm putting something, if it's a voice or something, I'm going to try to make sure that's near. If it's kind of something in the middle, then I'll make sure that that's in the middle. And then I go far if it's something that's maybe like a sound effect or something like that can kind of be hidden because it really will be hidden in binaural if you put it far. So you got to make sure that it's something that's kind of meant to be that way, and like not like the main stuff because when you hear it later on, it will be kind of drowned out because it's far away from you, like because you're trying to kind of get that effect, and that comes off better when you have those headphones on because you're just like, okay, oh, you're almost kind of looking around like what's going on, like that kind of thing. So now I love the settings, and also if you set it up, a lot of people, well, I'm sure they maybe know now, but for me, I like to go ahead and at least set mine up. So I have from 11 to 20 or whatever. I already have those all set for near. I have the other one set for mid. I have the other one set for far. So when I'm actually even going through and mixing on those records, I can just set it up because when I'm doing, I'm like, oh, this sound for binaural needs to be far. It needs to be near. It needs to be whatever. So that way I don't have to go back and do it later on.
Yep, you can set up your groups, and you know which sounds are going to fit best
Right.
with those settings. So
Right, exactly, and that way I don't have to do it and try to figure it out later on where I'm putting different stuff at. And I like to check it as well, so I'll kind of go ahead and click it over to binaural and check it out with the headphones on, just to kind of see, make sure that I'm getting a good balance of stuff. And like I said, the stuff most of the time, especially with the far stuff, because like I said, it will kind of tuck it and make it sound far away. So I try to make sure whatever it is that I put far, that it's not drowning out.
this is kind of a broad concept, but mixing in Dolby Atmos and specifically for hip hop, do you think there's an opportunity for Atmos to have an influence on how hip hop's made and consumed as well?
Oh, definitely. I think all music really, but especially hip hop, because especially with a lot of trap, I tell people this all the time. With a lot of trap music, sometimes the simple is better. So it's not a lot of layers a lot of times, and that's kind of where we had to come as engineers. That I had to be creative in Dolby Atmos because, like I said, I think that for me listening to a lot of Dolby Atmos, the more layers that you have, the better it sounds because you got more stuff to fill up this room. So sometimes you don't really have that necessarily with some hip hop tracks because most of it's kind of drum driven, and then you might only have a loop and maybe one other sound. So the whole beat might only have 8 sounds total with the drums and the music. So I think that it will because I think people add little splashes of just, even if it's just some little ear candy, I think they'll add that to the stereo mixes, and then that'll kind of translate into Dolby Atmos mixes. And I think in the future as well, I think sometimes maybe the stereo mix might have certain elements that maybe the Dolby Atmos has some added elements to it, but it's the same song, but it's just little small elements added to it because it's like almost like this Dolby Atmos special edition kind of thing.
Nice, man. Thanks for sharing that. You've got your studio in Atlanta, and you work in other studios as well. What's your advice to young, up and coming either producers or mixers in the game as they're looking to get going in the 2023 era?
Man, I wish I grew up in this era actually, because the main thing is, like I said, of course, I'm self-taught, so a lot of stuff that I learned, like I said, I literally learned it on my own. I didn't have anybody being in Lexington, Kentucky. It was no studio that I could really go to, honestly, and nobody that could teach me. So I just learned it on my own, and just horrible mixes. Didn't know how to fly hooks. Didn't know how to duplicate. Didn't know what reverb meant. Didn't know what a compressor was, EQs, just trying to figure all this stuff out. So nowadays, I just think that it's actually easier. For one, the technology. I mean, you can literally have a computer, and I mean, it's the computers are so powerful that you're literally running sessions that maybe have 120 tracks, and you're running them smooth. So that's one thing. And then, shouts out to I always call it the school of YouTube. You can get on YouTube, and it's plenty of tutorials that you can kind of do. So I think that it's actually dope, man. And then, just if you're learning on your own, you can still go to school, but if you are learning on your own, just take the time to study. Because I still do it even to this day. Like, I'm still learning new stuff because technology it's always growing. Even AI is on the way. Like, no telling what can go on with that. I mean, I know some people. I've already heard about them having different things where you can mix vocals, kind of run them through, and it kind of spits out something that it should be, and maybe you can kind of tweak it from there. So, main thing is really just stay focused with it. Do it every day. Study. If you can, of course, it's easier now because you can also get on Twitter, Instagram. It's other engineers that go on there, and I'm in maybe 4 or 5 different engineer groups with it's probably 50 engineers in each of those groups. So, we talk about different stuff, equipment, gear, new computers. Should you update your computer when the new OS drops? All that different type of stuff. What is it compatible? What's compatible? What plugins you should get? Just all this different stuff that we talk about. So main thing, like I said, just really study, immerse yourself in it, and don't quit. Because of course the main thing is you want to be able to get work. So like I said, in Kentucky, it really wasn't a lot of work for me at that point in time. But what I did was I stayed with my friends that I knew, and I built up with them. And I think that's the main thing I tell people about getting work. Because even me, once I moved to Atlanta, and I was working at Hot Beats, I only maybe was handling a few clients, and then I did good with those clients, and then those clients referred me to other clients. Like I literally have never made a I've literally have never had business cards or anything. My work has been my business cards because those clients, what they're going to do is, like I said, they're going to come, they're going to listen, and then somebody hears their stuff and they're going to say, hey, who does your stuff? Oh, KY does it. Okay, cool. I need him. And that guy, and then it kind of just trickles on. So, just kind of building, that kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier as well, which is building relationships. So build those relationships, do good work, and research, and don't stop. That's it.
I love that, man. That's great advice. Thank you for sharing that, and
Yes,
congratulations
sir.
on all your success. Well deserved.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
And I know there's more to come. What's coming up for KY Engineering that you can talk about? What are you excited about? Anything cool on the horizon people should look out for?
Yeah, actually, I don't know when this is coming out. Actually, I don't know what I can tell you. When's this coming
We
out?
dropped this piece on March 1st, so don't want to get you in
Okay.
trouble. If there's anything you
Okay. Gotcha.
has
Gotcha.
recently come out you want to mention or might be out by then.
Well, we had talked about Callie, of course. So I actually have two songs that I just mixed for her. Finesse two times. He's a dope rapper from Memphis. So I'm doing some stuff on him. And I actually got a 2 Chainz and Wayne album that I'm in the process of mixing. So the Dolby Atmos, I'm gonna go super crazy on that as well. So Collie Grove 2 is on the way for sure.
Nice, man. Well, thank you so much for your time. Great to see you and appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
All
Thank
right.
you, man. Appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. My pleasure. So much wisdom in there. Good stuff. All right. The QR code is just on the screen there to grab a 30-day trial of Dolby Atmos Album Assembler. Of course, that's your tool for assembling your album of ADMs, putting the finishing touches on there. And if you need any assistance with that, we've got some quick start videos and the video with Jordan Glasgow and Georgetown Mastering. Very happy to welcome KY live to the session to answer your questions. How are you, man? Good to see you again. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Good seeing you too. How you doing?
I'm great. I'm great. And couldn't be happier than to sit down and chat with you. We've got some questions rolling in. We're just going to fire through them here, man. First one from Alex Solano. Shout out to Alex. He's always asking good questions and mix engineer himself. His question is about creating glue, stereo mix bus glue. So when you're hired to do the stereo and Atmos mix, how are you thinking about creating mix bus glue in the stereo version and having that translate over to Atmos?
So, of course, right now I'm doing stereo and going to Atmos, of course. So that's the way that I'm doing it right now. So, of course, I normally have my regular buses. So I normally have a delay. Normally I have different ones. So I have a 1/8, 1/4, half. Um, I maybe have like some modulation stuff, maybe like a doubler. Sometimes I like to use maybe like a screw. So I have like a deep kind of effect if I want to kind of do that. That kind of brings a lot of stuff, a lot of different stuff to it. Sometimes I have a saturation, maybe a lo-fi or something on aux, and of course, your delays and your reverbs and stuff like that. And sometimes I maybe use different delays and different reverbs. Well, I already said delays, but I use different reverbs as well. Sometimes I might use a regular plate. I have a roam, which is kind of bigger, different stuff. So small reverbs, big reverbs. Normally I'm doing, of course, mixes. So when I'm doing my stems to actually go to Atmos, I normally don't really have to do too much as far as adding reverb. But if I do want to add reverb or something or a extra, I normally just subtract because, of course, stems I print everything wet. So when I'm pretty much when I input all my stems into the session, it's already sounding like the mix. So I normally don't really have to do too much, but if it is something special that I want to maybe add, or I like make the reverb sound better in the Dolby Atmos and the immersive world, then I maybe just add it. But I really don't use too many oxes in the actual mix of the Atmos. I just kind of add it to whatever track that it is I need to add it to.
Cool, thanks. Taking it one step further on FX sends, Lucino sent us a question asking how you set up your FX sends for reverbs and delays. Do you do it differently for beds and objects?
No, like I said, it just kind of depends on like different tracks that I'm using. So some stuff, if I just feel like, hey, it just needs to be in the bed, then, and most of the time those would be like vocals, some of the drum stuff, a lot of drum stuff actually, I just kind of keep in the bed. Not just like I said, if it's something, maybe a hi-hat or something, I can kind of make that an object so that I can kind of move it around a little bit. But like I said, for a lot of times, I'm just normally just kind of leave it kind of where it is. So if I do need to add any effects or anything like that, I normally, like I said, just try.
Cool. I'm guessing this question's more about mixing while actually using headphones, but you did also talk about using the binaural settings plugin with the groups. But Yan is asking, what's your recommended workflow for headphone mixing?
For me personally, like I said, I normally kind of go to the headphones as a secondary thing. I actually like to have actually all the speakers. So of course I'm doing them at Solar Side with me as a 1.6. So I'm kind of more so listening. Like I said, in the renderer, I'll switch over to binaural, and I put the headphones on and kind of check it from there. And like I said, I like to do that because, of course, I think for right now, most are actually listening to Dolby Atmos. Most of them are listening in binaural. So, because of course, like I said, it's headphones, sound bars, different stuff like that. So a lot of times, like I said, I'm more so just checking it. So the headphones more of a secondary thing. So I really haven't started a mix and did it fully in headphones at this point. But I definitely use the headphones because, like I said, I know a lot of people, that's how they're going to hear the Dolby Atmos mixes. So I definitely like to always go back and forth from me actually listening to the speakers to me actually using headphones.
Cool, thanks. You talked about this a little bit in our chat, but are there ways that people deliver your tracks, either the amount or quality of stems, that help make your Atmos productions easier or better?
Yeah, so of course, when I get them, I like them to be 24-bit, at least 48K. So that's kind of the minimum. If you want to give me anything higher than that, that's fine as well. But at least that's the bare minimum for me. And of course, I definitely want some. At this point, I definitely want everything to be wet so that when I do import everything, it already sounds like the stereo mix, and then I can kind of take that and put that into this world. So that's kind of one of the very, very, very important things. And also, normally I have to do a main version, which is the dirty version, and I have to do a clean version. So if you can, just make sure everything kind of lines up with that. Of course, I always make sure that I have the master back as well, because you have to line up the master with the whole mix because they have to sync. So they have to be the same start point and the same end point.
Cool, thanks. Got a couple more rolling in. What are the complexities that you're facing mixing in Atmos? Is there anything you think could be improved maybe?
I say one of the main things really, I could bounce offline. That's probably like the main thing. Really just bounce offline. Because I remember just those days before I had offline bounce on Pro Tools, just the amount of time that I spent. Because normally when I'm doing a song, I normally have 7 different versions that I have to end up doing for each song. So I just remember those days. If the song was 5 minutes, I had to do 5 minutes time to get all those different versions. And I had to say if I was doing a whole album, 16 songs, and I got to do 7 versions for 16 songs. So, of course, with more mainly only doing the main and the dirty, so I don't have to do the acapellas and different stuff like that. But you know, I just wish I could bounce offline. I think that would be like kind of the main thing. But I wish I could bounce offline. And of course, a lot of times I try to tell people too, this is something important, just making sure just that you're not having phasing issues. I think that's kind of the main thing because, like I said, you are working with a lot of different speakers, so you kind of need to make sure I'm not getting these phasing issues. Just make it sound crazy when I'm listening to it.
Cool. We got 2 more, folks. If you have questions, please pop them into the questions tab and go to here. You talked about this a little bit in our chat, but when utilizing LFE for Atmos, how much signal do you send to it, and how do you know it's the right amount?
Normally, I just kind of listen to it. Like I said, like of course the sub information, the LFE, that's the sub information. So of course, say if I have an 808, you know, I just kind of try to give it a little bit. I don't try to go too far with it, honestly. Like maybe like 1 dB, like 2 dBs or something. Like I'm watching it on the meter, and I'm just watching like that's almost exactly the size of my finger. Like that's literally what I'm trying to do. And like I said, that's just so that I'm not, of course, like I said, like just slamming the LFE to where it sounds crazy. The bass information sounds crazy when other people are playing it. So I'm very light with it, and like I said, definitely just making sure that you know you're only adding to stuff that has sub and bass elements.
Awesome. And then final one for you. How are you sending tracks to your clients for them to QC or preview?
So of course most of the time I send an MP4, which is basically it's really a video, and if you really want to get creative with that, you can actually put a video on it, and really, you know what I'm saying, and of course because of course you have to print the ADM wave, so that's what the actual labels want. They want ADM wave, and of course that I tell people too, it's not like a regular normal wave file because you can actually take this wave file, and if you import it into a blank session, all the information that you had literally shows back up. So I wouldn't advise you to do it, but if you want to, you can actually really throw away your actual mix session that you used because wave is actually the same at the end of the day. But for labels as well, like I said, so that they can listen to it, because sometimes if you just if you're listening to something that doesn't have Dolby Atmos, like say if you get in the car or something like that, and you play that wave, sometimes some sounds will be missing. And a lot of those are maybe objects. Most of the time they're objects, and they'll be kind of missing. But if you send an MP4, everything will be right there. So I normally send an MP4 so that they can listen to it, and of course the ADM wave.
Awesome. KY, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom, man. Really appreciate it, and pleasure to see you, man.
Appreciate you having me, man. Good seeing you too.
All right, take care. Thanks, everybody.